It's been 84 years since I read this part of the story, and I finally saw it animated today. What's up everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel, and today we are discussing episode 2 of the Hashira training arc, Water Hashira GIYU TOMIOKA'S Pain. We'll address the name of that episode later. This episode I have been looking forward to since I read in the manga. GIYU is my second favorite character in the show, behind Tanjiro. So I have been waiting on this episode almost as much as I was waiting on that season finale of Swordsmith Village. Partially because of GIYU's backstory, but also because I was just looking forward to the entire thing come together as a whole, seeing Tanjiro just be incredibly silly the entire time, as well as the dialogue and everything in between. And let me tell you right now, Ufotable did not disappoint, so let's talk about it. And as always, I'm going to be splitting this video into parts. I will talk about some manga spoilers for the future at the end of this video. I'll make sure to put a spoiler warning beforehand, but the parts of this video is going to be just an overall review, a manga comparison, which I'm going to kind of actually mush those two together this time because I'm going to break it down a little bit more than I did in my last video, and I'm going to kind of just talk through each thing that happens as I break it down. And then I will make predictions on what I think the next episode is going to cover. That's where I'll get into some manga spoilers for manga that has not been adapted yet, and we'll kind of talk about what we can expect in the next episode. So let's do this. So my prediction was totally right in my last video. This episode adapted about one chapter of material. Now, if you've been with me a while, or this is your first time watching a video from me, you might not know, or you might know, but Ufotable's usual cadence that they adapt chapters of the manga to episode is usually around 3 chapters per episode. Now, I already predicted that this season was going to be very, very different from that based off of the fact that this arc is technically only 8 chapters and we're getting 8 episodes. Obviously, that means we're getting less than 3 chapters per episode. However, I didn't know exactly how they're going to do it, and let me be honest, I still don't fully know. I think it's going to fluctuate a lot, but this particular episode only adapted the second half of chapter 130 and the first half of 131. So we did not move forward in the manga compared to where we were at the end of the last episode because we had jumped ahead. We skipped over GIYU's backstory and Shinobu and Kanao's little conversation in the first episode to go to Tamayo getting the message from Ubuyashiki's crow. Ufotable is just kind of fixing up what they think might need to be changed with the flow of the story. They've done that a couple times, so we didn't move forward at all. We literally stayed stagnant within the manga, and we just adapted what was skipped over. Now, I'm gonna be real honest with y'all. I like this. I think that so far, all of the additions that they've added and everything that they've really sat on and expanded upon has all been very, very good for the story. I do think they need to be a little bit careful because I could definitely see some of this season turning into just a dialogue fest, which it already kind of is considering there's no big fight scenes in this arc. It's just a training arc. I get a little worried that we're gonna spend way too much time stretching out dialogue heavy scenes. However, I know they know what they're doing. I'm not super worried about that. I think they just need to be careful because there are definitely some casual viewers of this show that are going to get a little bit tired of that. Now, when it comes to this episode, however, I think all of the dialogue that was expanded upon was really good and very helpful to moving us forward in the story. So let's talk about it. So the first thing that was actually added from the manga is, of course, at the very beginning of this episode, we got a little bit of a recap of the end of last episode where we saw Ubuyashiki's crow talking to Tamayo. Of course, in this one, we get a little added comedic scenes of Hashira trying to get to her and being super clumsy and silly, and I really enjoyed that. That was not in the manga. And also we saw her talk to Hashira afterwards. This conversation was also not in the manga, and that includes the little flashback that we saw of Tamayo in a forest with two mysterious figures. I'm not going to talk about who they were because those are manga spoilers. I also personally really liked that they focused in on, I'm not going to say his name because it still hasn't fully been said in the anime, but the mysterious man that, you know, we've seen a lot that we thought was like Tanjiro's dad or something with the earrings. Very much they honed in on her memory of him having those earrings and making the same sound as Tanjiro, because it goes from her like flashing back to this moment to flashing back to when she met Tanjiro and Nezuko for the first time, and very explicitly the sound design focused in on the sound of the earrings. And I think that just kind of brought things full circle to us to make us realize as an audience that she kind of has known from the start, since the moment she met Tanjiro, that he might be different and that he might, you know, set things into motion. And while Nezuko's technically the one who has done that, I think it's been in the back of her mind, and then that's when she declares that she and Yushiro are going to take on this offer and they're going to go to Ubuyashiki's mansion to help out and to partner up with Shinobu. So really felt that that whole first minute and a half or 2 minutes, whatever it was done really well. A lot of it was anime original, and it was very good for the story to get that. Then following the OP, which by the way, I really like this OP. It's probably one of my favorites. It could be moving into like second or third. I'd have to wait till the season ends and like listen to all of them back to back because they're all so good, but the OP is really good. The visuals are spectacular as well. We got an anime original scene of Tanjiro reading the letter from Ubuyashiki. This scene, we do get excerpts of that letter in the manga, however, it's not just read like it was in the anime, so we could really see that Ubuyashiki is putting a lot of faith and trust into Tanjiro, and I think he's choosing Tanjiro for this partly because obviously none of the Hashira would be able to get through to GIYU even if they tried, which they probably wouldn't even want to. Ubuyashiki knows that GIYU technically does have a soft spot for Tanjiro. We saw that very much at the beginning of the entire show and then at the end of season 1, that GIYU really is doing a lot for these two. He's just being very quiet about it, and Ubuyashiki knows that Tanjiro does mean something to GIYU, so I think that's why he picked him. I like that they just added him reading the letter from Ubuyashiki and we hear his voice in it. Also, we see him with Amane, and it just brought the story kind of together rather than us just getting to see little excerpts of the letter later. Then following that, we once again get another anime original scene. This entire conversation between Tanjiro and Aoi was an addition. Was it really necessary? I don't know if that would be something that I would consider exceptionally good for the show. I think that it was good to see a little bit more of Aoi. She's going to be taking a back seat in the story. She is just a side character. She never really gets promoted to main character in this show, but I did enjoy getting to see a little bit more of her and then a little bit of development between the two of them. I don't ship them technically, but I do enjoy like their little friendship, and I know a lot of people do ship them as well, so it was a fun little scene. Okay, from here we finally pick back up in the manga where we left off of halfway through chapter 130. Now, this scene where he arrives at GIYU's house and is just like calling out his name over and over again, and then eventually says, okay, I'm gonna enter. This is all very faithful to the manga. This is pretty much the entire scene. I love the way they animated this with GIYU like opening one eye when he realized that Tanjiro opened the door, and then Tanjiro just being like, hello, like jump scare. Was really cute. That was really enjoyable. That's probably one of my favorite moments from the episode. It was so funny. This entire chapter, or second half of the chapter, this conversation went pretty much exactly as it did in the manga. Everything is pretty much the same. Now, this is when in the manga they added a little bit of the letter from Ubuyashiki. I guess it's not really an excerpt. I think it's pretty much word for word what we got in the anime. They just moved it to before Tanjiro arrived to talk to GIYU instead of during, essentially. Now, a lot of times when they adapt things for the anime, there's little narrator parts that get left out because there is a narrator in the manga that isn't like a character. However, they didn't do that in the anime, so most of the narration bits Tanjiro says instead, which is why there's so much dialogue. I think a lot of people think Tanjiro has a lot of heavy dialogue. It's partially because he's also narrating the story essentially through his thoughts. In the manga, there's just an unnamed narrator, so that means that sometimes if it doesn't work in the context of the conversation, where it would not make sense for Tanjiro to even like think what the narrator says. It just gets omitted from the show. None of these are usually that important. However, there was a little moment where it pointed at Tanjiro's foot and it said, "Foot is still healing." And then it did say that Tanjiro took the master's words at face value from the letter saying, like, please be persistent with him. And it kind of just goes to show how silly he is. Like, he, at the end of the day, while he is very sensitive to people's emotions, mostly because of his sense of smell, he also does not do a good job at picking up on social cues whatsoever. We've seen this many times, like when Genya said essentially F you, and he stripped down naked and jumped in with him. He's not very good at that. So I like that this entire scene very much shows that Tanjiro is just a silly kid that probably grew up homeschooled and sheltered and doesn't actually truly know how to communicate with adults outside of his own parents, but is still very sensitive to people's feelings. It makes him very, very layered, in my opinion, and people will say, oh, you're reaching, but I think it just does, because he is a kid who struggles with those things, but he's also able to sometimes, when it's important, understand what people are thinking. A bunch of scenes of Tanjiro kind of following GIYU around were additional. We went from essentially the letter to him, like there's one picture of him following him around and then it goes straight to him waiting outside of the bathroom for him, which, oh my gosh, Tanjiro, please let GIYU live his life some of the time. Like, I get being persistent, but maybe leave him alone when he's like taking a bath or trying to sleep or going to the bathroom. Like, maybe leave him alone on those. But again, it's just silly because Tanjiro just, he's like, well, he told me to be persistent, so I'm gonna be persistent. It's like, okay, Tanjiro, like, maybe lay off a little bit. But you know what? It worked, because we go straight into GIYU saying, maybe if I tell him something, he'll let me be. Otherwise, he's gonna stalk me for the rest of my life. Again, we're pretty much straight on with the manga. GIYU talks about not passing final selection. The dialogue here is pretty much exactly the same. No real changes here. They did add some dialogue from Sabito in the flashback of final selection. They also, Murata is drawn here in the manga, however, it's a little bit less clear than it was in the anime that it was Murata. So this is like a fun little Easter egg for everyone to notice that, oh, Murata, who we've already met a few times, he's kind of been around, he was there on Mount Natagumo, he was in the same final selection as GIYU. So we're able to kind of see how much farther GIYU has gone and just how talented he actually is, because I'm fairly certain at this point our Kamaboko squad, at least Tanjiro with his now assist kills of 6 and 4, upper 6 and 4. I mean, Tanjiro has, lower 5 wasn't really anything, he wasn't able to do anything at the end of the day, but he assisted lower 1, and then he assisted upper 6, and now he's assisted upper 4. I'm fairly certain Tanjiro is now ahead of Murata. We love Murata in this house and we stan him, but it just kind of shows the difference in like talent and maybe someone who has a little less talent. The flashback had all kinds of little added dialogue here and there. We got to see Sabito do a water breathing form. I love that they brought back Yuki Kaji, who's one of my favorite voice actors, to come in just for some small lines, but he got to do a breathing form, which was super fun. It went on to be pretty much exactly word for word. Tanjiro talks about understanding how GIYU feels, and not really anything added here. They didn't add a whole lot. I thought they were gonna add a little bit more to his backstory, but they definitely added to it, like showing Urokodaki, having their little moments here and there, but they honestly more just stretched out the entirety of everything leading up to that. And then the backstory itself was still fairly quick. I know people will probably be a little bit disappointed in that. I personally am not really. I thought they still did the backstory justice, and it gave us just enough to understand why GIYU is the way that he is. And I personally really, really loved the voice acting in this scene, the animation. I had tears in my eyes and then I would instantly be laughing. They did just a really, really good job at adding just little bits here and there so that we could enjoy the silliness leading up to it, and then we got to the seriousness of it. We were able to sit with it for a moment, and then we moved back into the silliness. But same thing, we saw Rengoku, and then Tanjiro talks about how he thought it would have been better if he had died instead of Rengoku, which always gets me. You know, this is a big moment for Tanjiro to say that. We've been kind of expecting that this entire time, but for him to just outright say, like, yeah, I thought I should have died, and then it shows Inosuke, like, telling him that Rengoku believed in him, tearing up for sure. But everything here is, again, very, very much word for word. They really didn't add much. They just really sat on all the dialogue and stretched everything out, but they didn't add a lot of anime original content here. And then we went straight into Tanjiro being silly again and asking for the soba eating contest. The soba eating at the restaurant was only one tiny little panel right here. And of course they added to that, so we got to see them actually eating together, which is super cute. And then GIYU asking Tanjiro about Shinobu, which was the perfect segue leading into Shinobu's scene, which this was like picture perfect, word for word, very much directly from the manga. And then that's it. That was the end of the episode, and in the manga now we get into when the bird arrives at Tomio's place, but of course, like I mentioned, that was beforehand. So that is the manga comparison. I hope you enjoyed that I went into a little bit more detail, but that was my deep breakdown, so let's just talk an overview real quick. Overall, the episode did not disappoint me whatsoever. I had a lot of high hopes for this episode, and one thing that I truly, truly love about Ufotable's adaptation of Demon Slayer is that as a manga reader, every time that a big moment that I've been looking forward to has come in the anime, I have not been disappointed. Everything about it has just blown my expectations out of the water, even though I go into it with high expectations. And that comes from the voice acting, the music, the animation, just the way they write the story, the way they ebb and flow in the pacing and everything. They just did such a good job at this. This is a pinnacle part of the show. I don't know if anime onlys really know that yet, but in the future, you'll understand why this is such a big deal, but I also can understand why many people will know this is a big deal, because this is finally, we're exploring GIYU. GIYU is the Hashira that we've literally known since the first episode. Every other Hashira we didn't meet until more than halfway through season 1 or later to the end of season 1. And he's also just been the most mysterious because all of the other Hashira that we've gotten enough time with them to explore their backgrounds at least a little bit and grow to love them. But even though GIYU's been the most present in the story this entire time, finally seeing his backstory, we can finally start to understand him, and we can also get a feel for how well loved he is by the fandom. I think anime onlys finally know maybe why we love him so much, and that is because his backstory to me is very different. He still suffered at the hands of demons, but his suffering was a little bit different in the fact that he has survivor's guilt and he doesn't feel worthy because he didn't kill one demon at final selection. The moment where he says, "I don't belong shoulder to shoulder with the other Hashira," we finally understand why he said that in last week's episode, rather than him thinking he's better than them like most of the Hashira thought he meant. He's saying that he literally doesn't deserve to be next to them, that he does not even deserve to be a demon slayer. So I'm really looking forward to more development with him and Tanjiro, because they're gonna be, I like to call this the start of the big brother little brother arc, and there's gonna be a lot of development for both those characters and between the two of them that I can't wait to see animated. This is just the start, but overall I give this episode an easy 10 out of 10. I wouldn't change anything about it. I know I called out some things that I think other people might not quite like, but honestly I felt that every step, every direction that they took this episode was exactly where I wanted it to go. I really enjoyed the episode. I think this one will probably be one of my favorites of the entire season, because I've been looking forward to this episode for years, and it's finally here, and it did not disappoint. It was so good. GIYU is here. He is here to stay. People are going to start to love him like they should, because he deserves all the love, and I'm very excited to finally see his fandom grow after this episode. Alright, so now is the part of the video where I'm going to dip into some manga spoilers for the future, as I'm going to talk about my predictions of what I think the next episode is going to cover, as well as the pacing. Now, this one I don't have that good of an idea of what it is, but I am still going to make my own little predictions and see what happens. Personally, I think in this next episode they're going to actually pick the pace up a little bit as far as adapting. However, that being said, Chapter 132, Tanjiro gets through Tengen, Muichiro, Mitsuri, Obanai, and starts with Sanemi. I might take that back. I think next episode might cover less than this entire chapter. I think that there's really opportunity for some of these Hashira to have a lot more time with Tanjiro, and I also think there's some opportunity for us to check in with the other characters and see kind of where they're at. We already know, based off of the end of today's episode, that Kanao is already to Sanemi, the Wind Hashira. That's what she was telling Shinobu. But I'd love to just check in with Zenitsu, Genya, and Inosuke as well, and just see kind of where they're at, how they're doing with the training, rather than only follow Tanjiro. He is very quick through. Yeah, it was after 10 days that he got sent through to Muichiro. It was after 5 days that he got sent to Mitsuri, and then he got sent to Obanai. I guess it doesn't specify how long he was with Mitsuri, but he got sent through to Obanai. Obanai was a little bit tougher because Obanai does not like him. The other Hashiras so far have been like, Tanjiro, it's so good to see you. And Obanai's like, I've been waiting for you, brat. And so Obanai's training was a little bit harder for him. I don't think it specifies how long. It's mentioned that it's taking longer because it was harder to do. And then we get to Sanemi. We have like one quick training sesh with Sanemi, and then we begin the Genya and Sanemi moment that I will become Sanemi's greatest hater. So we could get all the way through that. Okay, I'm really beating around the bush here. If I had to make a airtight prediction of how next episode is going to go, we'll say that it's gonna go through till the end of training with Obanai, and it's gonna end with him with Zenitsu running towards him and like, get away from him or something like that. That way the next episode can spend a little bit more time with the whole situation with Genya and Sanemi, because I think we're gonna need to spend a little bit of time on that, as much as I hate that scene, and I really will become a Sanemi hater with that. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm gonna assume that I'm gonna be way off the mark. However, I did predict this episode perfectly. It was easier because they had jumped around. Now that we've just covered the first 4, 28, 29, 30, and 31, the first 4 chapters of the arc, we're already halfway through technically in the manga. It's gonna be much harder to predict as we move on, but I'm gonna do my best. But that's about all I have for this video. I really enjoyed the episode. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. It's probably in at least my top 10 of the entire show, maybe even top 5. I'd have to sit down and really figure out. But I'm gonna wait until the end of the season anyway to figure out what my ranking is. Right now, it might not be in my top 5 because I am someone who really enjoys those heavy battle sequences. However, I really love GIYU's backstory. I really love seeing Tanjiro just be silly like he deserves, walking around on that crutch. It was very much enjoyable. Now, if you wanted a deeper dive into GIYU's backstory or my thoughts on that kind of stuff for this video, don't worry. I'm actually reserving my Thursday slot this week for a deep dive into GIYU's story as a whole. Don't worry if you want my thoughts on GIYU's backstory. There is a video coming. I promise. I'm working very hard at it, and it'll come later this week. But that is all I have for today, so thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment what you thought of this episode. If it lived up to your expectations, go ahead and give it a rating as well. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'm posting these videos every week following an episode where I'll give you that breakdown of manga to anime, so you kind of know where we're at in the manga compared to the anime and see how the pacing is going. Also, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever I post a new video. And finally, you can follow me on all my socials. I am at Looking Nerdy on Instagram, TikTok, and X, and I'll put the link in the description below. But with that being said, I'll see you all later. Johnny!